The clinical definitions and impacts on children for neglect and favoritism differ significantly, as one is a form of child maltreatment while the other is a pattern of preferential treatment. Neglect, clinical definition and impact in a clinical and child welfare context. Neglect is a type of child maltreatment defined as the failure of a parent or caregiver to provide a child with the care and supervision necessary to ensure their well-being and health. Neglect is generally an act of omission, a failure to act, as opposed to abuse, which is an act of commission, an action taken to harm. Neglect is typically categorized into different types: physical neglect, failure to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, or supervision or protection from hazards. Medical neglect, failure to provide necessary medical, dental, or mental health care. Educational neglect, failure to ensure a child receives appropriate education, such as chronic unexcused truancy. Emotional neglect, failure to provide a child with adequate emotional support, care or affection, which can include exposing them to extreme violence or substance abuse. Impact on children. Neglect is the most common form of child maltreatment and can have severe and long-lasting effects on a child's development, often more damaging than physical abuse. Brain development. Severe neglect, especially in early childhood, is linked to abnormalities in the structure and functioning of the developing brain, including reduced overall size and poor connections in areas vital for emotional, social, and cognitive competence. Cognitive and academic issues. Children may experience lower IQ scores, language deficits, academic delays, and difficulty with executive functioning skills, like working memory and self-control. Emotional and behavioral problems. Neglected children often struggle with insecure or disorganized attachment to caregivers, leading to difficulties in forming healthy relationships. They may also develop low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, poor impulse control, and an increased risk for antisocial or high-risk behaviors later in life. Physical health. Chronic neglect can result in delayed physical growth, impaired immune systems, and a higher risk for various chronic physical and mental health issues in adulthood. Favoritism. Clinical definition and impact. Favoritism, often called parental differentiation in psychological research, is the intentional or unintentional preferential treatment of one child over another within a family. Unlike neglect, it is not legally defined as child maltreatment unless the preferential treatment rises to the level of emotional abuse, degrading, rejecting, or isolating a child. In a clinical context, favoritism is the pattern of offering unearned affection, benefits, gifts, or opportunities to a favored child, while the disfavored child may receive less attention, more criticism, or harsher punishment. This differentiation is often rooted in a parent's unconscious preference, which may be due to a child's personality, behavior, or physical resemblance to the parent. Impact on children. The impact of favoritism largely revolves around the perception of unequal treatment, which can negatively affect both the favored and the unfavored child. Impact on the unfavored child. Emotional distress. They are vulnerable to feelings of loneliness, anger, worthlessness, depression, and anxiety. Self-esteem. They often develop low self-esteem and a negative view of themselves, believing that their efforts won't lead to desired rewards. Sibling relations. They are more likely to experience hostility, jealousy, and resentment toward the favored sibling, which can strain relationships into adulthood. Impact on the favored child. Social and relational difficulties. They may struggle in future relationships due to an inordinate desire for acceptance or an expectation of perpetual special treatment. Sibling resentment. They often face resentment and conflict from their siblings, which diminishes overall sibling closeness. Pressure. They may carry the added weight of greater parental expectations and feel pressure to maintain their favored status by constantly pleasing the parent, potentially hindering the development of their own distinct identity. The long-term effects of childhood neglect and favoritism profoundly shape an individual's adult relationships, self-esteem, and overall well-being. Long-term impact of childhood neglect. Childhood neglect, particularly emotional neglect, the omission of emotional responsiveness, leads to deep-seated issues in forming secure and healthy adult relationships, primarily through the development of insecure attachment styles. 1. Romantic relationships and intimacy. Insecure attachment. Neglected children often develop anxious or avoidant attachment styles. Anxious attachment leads to a fear of abandonment, a constant need for reassurance, people-pleasing, and sometimes clingy or overly demanding behavior. Avoidant attachment leads to a fear of intimacy, emotional detachment, avoidance of deep connection, and difficulty opening up or being vulnerable. Trust issues. A lack of consistent, reliable care in childhood fosters a pervasive distrust of others' intentions, leading to suspicion and difficulty believing a partner's love or commitment. Emotional dysregulation. Adults may struggle to identify, express, or manage their own emotions, emotional numbness or outbursts, making partners feel shut out or confused. They may also find it hard to respond appropriately to a partner's emotional needs. Boundary issues. They may either have rigid, walled-off boundaries, avoidance of intimacy, or porous, non-existent boundaries, people-pleasing or codependency, to maintain relationships. 2. Self-view and mental health. Low self-esteem, a core belief of unworthiness or being not enough, stemming from the childhood experience that their needs were unimportant or ignored. Mental health. Neglect is linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and other psychological difficulties in adulthood. Self-sabotage, due to a profound fear of abandonment. Some may unconsciously self-sabotage relationships when they become too close or loving, pushing away a partner to avoid the anticipated pain of being left. Long-term impact of parental favoritism. The long-term effects of parental favoritism center on sibling relationships and the individual's self-concept relative to others. 1. Sibling relationships. Estrangement and tension. The perception of unequal treatment is a primary predictor of long-term tension, resentment, and reduced closeness among adult siblings, often leading to full estrangement. This happens regardless of whether the individual was the favored or the unfavored child. Conflict over caregiving. Sibling rivalries often rear their ugly heads when parents become older and require care, leading to conflict over who is responsible and who is deserving of any inheritance or financial resources. 2. Impact on the unfavored child. Chronic insecurity. They often carry lifelong feelings of inadequacy, injustice, and lower self-esteem. Seeking validation, they may develop a chronic need to feel special or be recognized by external sources, which can lead to overachieving or intense neediness in friendships and romantic relationships. Distance from parents. They are less likely to seek support from their parents as adults and may feel disconnected or angry toward the parent who showed the preference. 3. Impact on the favored child. Pressure and anxiety. They can feel immense pressure to maintain their perfect status or continue to meet high parental expectations, which can hinder the development of their genuine self and lead to anxiety. Interpersonal difficulties. They may struggle with their adult partners or friends who don't offer the unearned validation or preferential treatment they received from their parents. Sibling resentment. While they benefit from parental favor, they often pay a social cost by experiencing resentment from their siblings, which can also contribute to lower satisfaction in their adult sibling relationships. Getting help involves two main avenues: professional therapeutic support and self-directed healing practices. The approach for healing depends slightly on whether the primary experience was neglect, often leading to issues with emotional awareness, or favoritism, often leading to issues with self-worth and comparison/competition. 1. Professional therapeutic support. Therapy provides a safe and structured environment to process deep-seated emotional wounds and change lifelong patterns. For neglect and attachment issues. Since neglect is a form of trauma, specifically a trauma of omission, a trauma-informed therapist is highly recommended. Look for therapists specializing in trauma-informed therapy, therapies that specifically address the effects of early life trauma and neglect. Attachment-based therapy focuses on identifying and healing the insecure attachment styles, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, that develop from inconsistent care. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, a well-researched therapy effective for reducing the distress associated with traumatic memories, including those from neglect. Somatic therapies, for example, somatic experiencing helps reconnect the mind and body, which is crucial since chronic neglect often leads to emotional numbing or a disconnect from physical sensations. Internal family systems, IFS, /parts work, helps individuals identify and integrate the various parts of themselves, for example, the wounded inner child, the critical inner voice, the detached adult. For favoritism and family roles, if the main struggle is around feeling unfavored or dealing with lifelong sibling dynamics, consider individual psychotherapy to work on self-worth. Chronic comparison and breaking the family role you were assigned, for example, the scapegoat or the golden child. Family therapy, if applicable, if you wish to improve current adult relationships with parents or siblings and they are willing to participate. However, this is only recommended if the current environment is safe and not actively abusive. Group therapy can be incredibly powerful for relationship issues, as it offers real-time opportunities to practice assertiveness, set boundaries, and receive validation from others who understand what it's like to feel marginalized or pressured within a family system. How to find a good therapist: search by specialization. Use directories to filter for therapists specializing in childhood emotional neglect, CEN, attachment issues, complex PTSD, CPTSD, or family of origin issues. Ask key questions. In an initial consultation, ask about their experience with your specific issue and what kind of approach they would use. Trust your gut. The most important factor in successful therapy is the relationship between you and the therapist. If you feel heard, respected, and safe, you found a good fit. 2. Self-directed healing practices. While professional help is often necessary, there are powerful steps you can take on your own to facilitate healing. For healing neglect, focus on emotional awareness. The core task is to reparent yourself by validating the feelings that were ignored in childhood. Practice emotional awareness. Set aside time daily to check in with yourself. Instead of immediately distracting, pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? Use a feelings wheel if needed. Where do I feel this in my body? Tension, warmth, emptiness. What do I need right now? Rest, food, comfort, a boundary, validation. Inner child work. Acknowledge your younger self and the pain they experienced. Visualize comforting or speaking kindly to that child, giving them the validation and compassion they didn't receive. Self-compassion. Challenge your inner critic. When you make a mistake, treat yourself with the same understanding and forgiveness you would offer a friend. For healing favoritism, focus on self-worth and boundaries. The core task is to establish your independent identity and stop the comparison cycle. Establish your own standard of success. Consciously define what you value, for example, creativity, kindness, peace, instead of measuring your worth by your job title, income, or material possessions against your siblings. Set clear boundaries. Decide what behaviors you will and will not accept from family members. This may involve limiting contact with highly competitive or critical siblings, changing the subject when a parent starts comparing you to a sibling, saying no to requests that drain you or violate your time. Stop the comparison. When you find yourself comparing, consciously interrupt the thought and immediately list 3 things you like about yourself or 3 accomplishments you are proud of, regardless of what your siblings have or have done. Cultivate chosen family. Invest your time and energy in non-familial relationships, friends, partners, mentors that are supportive, affirming, and free of the old family dynamic.